Where should we sit?
To move the chairs?
Oh.
मतलब जो करना है बैठ जाओ या one on
Thanks. I don't know why.
A very good afternoon to all of you. It is a great pleasure and excitement that I welcome you all for this important session focusing on India's infrastructure readiness for AI. Today, we all have us gathered here to lay the groundwork for India's ambitious goal in AI and ensuring that infrastructure development aligns with national priorities of innovation, self-reliance, and inclusive growth. Let me introduce our distinguished panelists for this session who will guide us through this enlightening journey of exploration and discovery. Our first panelist is Mr. Thomas Zakaria, Senior Vice President AMD, Colonel A.K. Nath, Executive Director CDAC, Mr. Vishal Dhupar, MD Asia South, NVIDIA, Mr. Sambit Sahu, Senior Vice President Kritrim Ola, Mr. Anil Nanduri, Vice President Intel, Mr. Hriday Vikram, Senior Vice President NetWeb Technologies, Mr. Rohini Srivatsa, CTO Microsoft India and South Asia, Mr. Ranganath Sadashiv, CTO HB Enterprises, Mr. Gaurav Agarwal, Vice President AI Reliance Jio, Mr. Sunil Gupta, Co-founder, MD and CEO Yota Data Services, Mr. Tanuj Bhojwani, Head People Plus AI, and the man with the most difficult job for this star-studded panel, Mr. Amlan Mohante from Carnegie, India. Now, I would like to request, as you all are aware, the India AI mission has been approved by Government of India in March 2024 with the vision to make AI in India and make AI work for India. It aims to make India a global leader in AI and to develop technological self-reliance of India in the field of artificial intelligence. With the vision of Global India AI Summit is being organized to focus on the key pillars of the AI ecosystem which are also highlighted in the India AI mission, that is compute capacity, foundational models, datasets, application development initiatives, future skills, startup financing, and safe and trusted AI. The India AI compute pillar of the mission aims to build a high-end scalable AI computing ecosystem for catering the increasing demands from India's rapidly expanding AI startups and research ecosystem. The AI compute infrastructure of 10,000 plus GPUs will be built through PPP, public-private partnership, to strengthen the AI ecosystem of the country. Further, an AI marketplace will also be built to offer AI as a service and pre-trained models to AI innovators, which will act as a one-stop solutions to resources critical for AI innovation. MITI has undertaken two-pronged implementation approach for setting up compute infrastructure in the country. As already mentioned, MIT will be setting up 10,000 GPUs through the PPP model, but the building of this enormous AI infrastructure will take some time. Till that time, MIT will be providing subsidized compute services to researchers and innovators by empanelment of compute services provider. MIT will be inviting expression of interest from existing compute service providers for empanelment. Talking about this session, India's infrastructure readiness for AI, the proposed panel discussion will aim to address the key issues around readiness of AI infrastructure in India. Now I would like Mr. Amlan Mohante, the moderator for this session, to take this session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a very good lunch and are settled in nicely for, I think, what promises to be a very engaging session, a very different session, I think, from what we've seen already over the course of the morning. We are here today to discuss, as Anuj said, the present and future of India's AI infrastructure. I think we're going to be covering two specific aspects of this. One, to take stock of where we are today in terms of India's infrastructure for AI, and two, really present a roadmap to make India future ready for what's coming on AI. As you all know, there are many dimensions to thinking about compute and AI infrastructure. There's the economic angle to it, there's a political angle to it, a technological angle to it, environmental, geopolitical, and we'll try and do justice to each of these issues over the course of our 60 minutes we have here today. But I think we're going to be focusing primarily on four big issues. The first is around strategy around investment and PPP, right? The public-private partnership model. We really want to talk about, what types of investment strategies are most likely to benefit India's strategic interests in the long term. We also want to talk about how the government and the private sector can collaborate to make the goals of the India AI mission a success. The second big theme is around sovereign AI. One of the goals of building India's AI infrastructure is to make India self-sufficient. But do we really have a clear conception of what we mean by sovereign AI? So that's something we'd like to explore in this panel. The third is around access and affordability. As you all know, we're here as part of the GPAI summit, and a key goal of the GPAI, as we saw in the September declaration, is to make AI accessible, democratic, inclusive, and sustainable. So what we really want to do is try and understand, in the Indian context, what the problems around access are, and maybe perhaps propose some solutions for how we can make AI both accessible and affordable. The fourth and final theme we'll touch on is about people. It's about who's going to be building this infrastructure, what kind of skills we need to be able to build this out, and where that's going to come from. With that, I'm here to kind of open up this panel. Maybe some quick house rules just before we go. To start with, can I please request the organizers, can we please have the doors at the back closed? There's a lot of background noise. But for the speakers, I am absolutely delighted to have all of you here, and the organizers at MeitY for making this happen. We have everybody from across the AI stack represented here, right? Industry stalwarts, senior government officials, people engaging with people on the ground who are actually building and using AI. So it's my absolute delight to have all of you here, and also the challenge of trying to ensure in 60 minutes I get all of you to be able to share your insights. My name is Amlan. I'm a non-resident research fellow at Carnegie India. Our goal is to produce independent research and analysis on issues of AI policy, and that's what we're trying to do here today. It's not just a roundtable discussion that we're broadcasting. We're trying to actually create some actionable insights that we want to feed in to the government strategy on compute. There's a lot of people in this room, so if I can please request all of the speakers, keep your remarks to about 90 seconds each. I can come back to you, right, for a second round of interventions, but I really want to get everyone into this discussion so we can make it inclusive, interesting, but most importantly, useful for the audience that we have here today. Right. So to kick things off, I'd like to invite Thomas Zakaria to share a 10-minute keynote address to kick things off before we get into our roundtable discussion. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you, Amlan. Good afternoon, all of you. It's such a pleasure to be here, to be part of this discussion. And I would be remiss if I don't take this opportunity to congratulate the government of India in launching this really remarkable initiative. And having been part of similar initiatives in the US during my career, I would also be remiss if I don't acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that has been done to prepare this initiative. I know it requires lots of meetings, consensus building, and ultimately to launch an initiative that is so significant. So congratulations to all of you in the Secretariat who has made this initiative possible. Now, I'm going to take my 10 minutes to try to frame the discussion from my vantage point of view. And my vantage point of view is having spent 35 years of my career in the US at a US government lab. And actually 3 decades of deploying and building leading edge frontier computers. So that sort of dates me, but the first supercomputer that I was responsible for, which was ranked #1 in the world at the time, was an Intel Paragon XPS 150. There were 2 copies, one at Sandia National Lab and one at Oak Ridge National Lab. Let me put this in context. If you have an iPhone 6 or better, you have the power of that computer in your hand. And to me, that is what is fascinating about the current decade or the current moment that we are living in, is because you have the power of a supercomputer in your hand with which you interact with a cloud or a GPU infrastructure that is now can be conversational and get information back to you fairly quickly in ways that can dramatically change the direction of how we live, work, play, and interact with each other. And there, I think India has an advantage because the penetration of mobile phones in this country and the data that you have, particularly at the edge, gives India a tremendous advantage. So I'm not going to, well, maybe this will work. So I'm not going to go through all 3 decades of my experience having deployed about a dozen or more of supercomputers, but I will just focus on the last 4. The 4 that you're seeing in the background are 4 systems that when they debuted at #1 in the world. Now, that has its own merits, but the reason why that is important is that means that when we were deploying, we really did not know how it's going to work. I've always said that the machines, I've never deployed a system that I promised. I've always deployed something that is better. Because typically it takes about a 4-year design build cycle. And today, at the rate at which GPUs and CPUs are coming into the market, we have almost an annual cadence. That means you have 4 generations away when you're trying to build these infrastructure. So as India thinks about building the infrastructure, that is something that you want to keep in mind. The second thing that is really interesting about this chart is that it was in 2007, Los Alamos National Laboratory had just deployed Roadrunner, which was the first system that broke the petascale barrier. And so we had a series of workshops at Oak Ridge, Argonne, and Berkeley, where we invited the best minds in the field from all over the world to come and talk about deploying an exascale system. And the conclusion was that it cannot be done. Why? Because the best estimate at the time was that it will take 1 gigawatt of power to run an exascale system, which was not going to be something that the government was going to support. I don't know the price in India, but it cannot be that much different. But in the US, a megawatt is roughly $1 million a year, so 1 gigawatt of power is $1 billion for just the utility, electric bill, to run a computer, which was not in the cards. So we put as a design goal that we're going to deploy an exascale system in 2018. Why? Because it rhymed with 10 to the 18. And with a power budget of roughly around 20 megawatts. And the best estimate, if you were to squeeze out every known innovations that we had at our fingertips, we thought we could get it at 140. 140 megawatts sounded a lot better than a gigawatt. And I can tell you I almost got fired because everybody said that this is crazy. So I will just skip to Titan. And when it came to Titan, what happened was that the Dennard scaling just, this is when you get kneecapped. We had decided on a multi-core processor, which just was taken out of the roadmap because it was found to be too power hungry. So we had committed to building a machine for which we had no processor. People were just beginning to dabble with GPUs. GPUs were a gaming processor, did not have, remember in the scientific world, you wanted to be repeatable, reliable results. So which meant 64-bit arithmetic and error-correcting memory. That was not in the cards. There was this tiny little company compared to today. It was about a $3 billion market cap. And the CEO of that company, you might have heard of him. His name was Jensen Huang. And he came to Oak Ridge, and over dinner at a restaurant called Bistro by the Tracks, we decided that he could take out enough of the graphics engine from the die to put in 64-bit math. And the reason why I tell that story is that don't assume that the roadmap is predetermined. There are going to be changes in the way. And so we deployed for the first system at scale, which had 18,000 GPUs and 18,000 CPUs. Now we talk about 10,000 GPUs. This is back in 2012. We deployed 18,688 GPUs that had 64-bit error-correcting memory. Summit came next, and then ultimately Frontier. And Frontier was really interesting because what you see in the bottom is government investment. It is not just purchasing GPUs and CPUs. Government invested, in all these systems in non-recoverable engineering dollars to get the machines built, and then through programs called Fast Forward, and we invested in driving the innovations in the chip. And so, for example, what you're seeing is 3D stacking technologies, chiplets, memory, etc., that allowed us to deploy the exascale system Frontier with, as you see, at 29 megawatts for 1.2 exaflop of performance. 2.5 years later, it is still the #1 system. So that tells you we were pushing the envelope and driving. And so I think that India's aspiration should be not only driving the ecosystem, but also impacting the roadmap, because it'll have a global impact. What you do here will change the course of how things are done globally. Now, this is another thing. So if you go back and look at when we deployed the Titan, which is the first instantiation of large GPUs, it suddenly changed the framework. Now, Google started thinking about TPUs in 2015. They deployed TPUs in about 15 months for the development cycle. What you're seeing is really the number of publications. You see that there is a hockey stick kind of change. So the availability of this infrastructure changed the trajectory of the imagination of people in terms of what could be done, and that is what that graph is pointing to. And that's going to happen here, and you should be prepared for that. This is a framework. This was discussed in the morning. I'm not going to go too much further, but I think India's strength is data. I think models and applications. You have a very large pool of talented folks, and this sort of tailoring the infrastructure. I think it is probably not realistic to go in the frontier scale infrastructure. 10,000 GPUs. It's plenty enough to develop, to create a developer ecosystem. My message here is that my 30-year experience tells you that there's going to be an insatiable appetite for compute cycles. And so you should be planning for the next instantiation and the next instantiation, because that is what is going to drive the true innovation ecosystem that you can expect in India. So why do I say, what to expect? So these are real numbers. So if you're looking at the number of parameter counts, or the size of models that you're trying to build, the frontier, so you see that exponential curve. What you see is 1 trillion parameters in the outer edge, which is comparable to ChatGPT-4 and sort of frontier models. That run, if you want to make, I use 6 rupees and 90 cents a kilowatt hour. That translates to $250,000 per one training run. So at the frontier scale, this is pretty expensive business. But you don't need to be there to develop the ecosystem. What you see is that in the billion, 10 billion, $100 billion range, you're going to do remarkable things, particularly for the use cases and solution space. And that is really where you're going to have the vibrant ecosystem. By the way, inference is also, as you scale the number of queries coming in, you see that the power demands are going to be extremely impressive. And so that is another thing that you should be thinking about as you build. I have built 3 data centers, each with about 60 to 70 megawatts of capacity. The last one, we spent $100 million retrofitting in order to prepare for frontier, because it was completely different technology in that currently that data center operates at a PUE of 1.03, one of the most efficient data centers that is available. And so there are things that you can do which you should be thinking about right now. You can also do, I think this is again playing to India's strengths. There are lots of algorithm improvements that you can make in order to develop models that takes into advantage low precision calculations. For AI models and frameworks, you don't need the 64-bit. In fact, there's a publication that has just come out that says that we can actually do it without any matrix multiplication. So don't restrict yourselves to what has been done to date. Use this as an opportunity to open up the aperture to innovate from India for the rest of the world, and of course, for India. And this is, to me, one of my pet slides, because when I think about AI infrastructure, I use AI infrastructure as analogy to the electric infrastructure, right? Ultimately, the people who will be using a mobile phone to engage with this infrastructure, with use cases and application, they don't want to know. When you flip the switch at your home, you want your lights to go on, your blenders to work, or refrigerator to work. They don't care which turbines are running to deliver the cycles. They don't care which GPUs or CPUs are behind the thing. What you want is to think about, here is the edge whether it is smart retail or in smart city or commercial enterprises. So having this kind of an ecosystem model allows you to innovate at scale and develop new products and really have a tangible impact on public good, economic, and national security. So I think of the pervasive AI as a best opportunity to really impact daily lives of billions of people. I mean, I don't know which, I happen to know somebody who was working on the cancer. Cancer is a reportable disease. It's something that clearly people are concerned about. India has a scale. Preventing cancer is better than treating cancer. And so projects like Karkinos and others that are going on in India is ideal. Automotive, and traffic flow, traffic control, sensors, industrial optimization, but also don't restrict your thinking about AI to the data center. There's going to be AI on your desktop. There's going to be low power, low latency AI at the edge. And those are the kinds of applications that is going to have a huge impact. So thinking of it as a connected, integrated ecosystem, I think, is really important. So I think this is my last slide. I think that if you think about the AI mission, I truly believe that the ambition is at the right scale. I think you have the plans for skilling and talent development, which is significantly important. I had a chance to interact with the senior members of the Secretariat today. And the public policy framework that you've laid out, I think is really, really top-notch. I think it's going to have a huge impact. Thinking about how to make this ecosystem available to the entrepreneurs, to incubate new companies, et cetera, is something that you ought to think about. The investments, both the government investment, but the multiplier. I mean, I truly take, I'm sure that success has thousand, fathers or owners or what have you. But in my small way, I would say that what we did at Oak Ridge in driving the GPU accelerated computing by government investment is why we are here today talking about AI, because of the data and the ability to process the data using GPUs at scale. And I think that this initiative is going to give you that opportunity. Engaging private sector to co-invest and amplify government investment, because government investment de-risks private capital so that private sector will invest in trying to build out this. And then, of course, don't forget investing in R&D and building the ecosystem. So congratulations. I wish I was in a different phase. I see a lot of young faces here. This is really an exciting time. I can look back over the last 3 decades, and there was not one moment that I regret. The only regret that I have is that I wish I could do this for another 3 decades. So I'll close with what Ray Kurzweil recently said, that modern technology, particularly medicine, today for every year of chronological year that you age, you get 4 months back because of improvements in medicine. He believes that with AI, that's going to be 5, 6, 7. Now, what I don't believe is that he thinks that the day will come when for every year you're going to grow younger, so maybe you'll become a baby. That is something that I would like to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for setting the stage for the panel discussion we're now going to get into. Thomas, from what you said, the thing that really struck me, one, is that you said India's ambitions on compute are in the right place. So I think that's something that we should really start with, right? Trying to define what that ambition is and how we're going to be able to realize that ambition. The second thing I think you said that was really interesting was that the choices that India makes is going to have global impact. And no better place to be making that statement than this global India AI Summit. So definitely want to get into the technological choices that India is going to be making in deploying its compute infrastructure. You mentioned Ray Kurzweil, and I was just listening to a TED talk that he published today, where he was talking about how every prediction he made about the singularity, people rubbished him and they were skeptical about him. And you said the same thing happened to you. And that's precisely what I'm going to make all of you here do today, which is try and predict and recommend choices for India's approach to compute infrastructure, right? So the first question really we want to talk about is how should India be investing across the compute stack to be able to realize that ambition? And what is that ambition? I would say from what we've heard today and other discussions is to make India the AI innovation, intelligence, and use case capital of the world. I think everybody in this room can agree that that's something we can get behind. What we want to discuss here today is how we can make that happen. And so there are many ways we can think about infrastructure. We can think about the production of compute in terms of different activities around manufacturing, assembling, packaging, and so on. We can think about different levels of that compute stack, starting with chips to software that's running that chip, to optimizing, to data centers, to cloud servers, and so on. So really we want to ask, if India is looking to deploy 4,000 crores over the next few years into compute, how should India approach that? I'll obviously want to get all of you into that discussion, but Vishal, maybe if I can start with you, right? Really starting at the bottom of the stack, but you often talk about thinking about this as a platform. India has been talking about investing 4,000 crores in the acquisition of 10,000 GPUs, right? Talk us through what the next few stages of that should look like, right? Clearly, we heard from Thomas, we're going to have an insatiable appetite for compute. 10,000 GPUs isn't going to cut it. So firstly, how should we be deploying those 4,000 crores and acquiring those GPUs? Is GPUs the only place that we should be investing? And what should the next 3 to 5 years of that journey look like? And sorry, and you also only have 2 minutes.
Does this work? All right, great. I think, Thomas, you set it up really well. I know when you used to come into Indian Institute of Science and talk about the Oak-Ridge relationship, it was talking about one workload at any given time. We've crossed paths long time back, and the world has changed. We are at an era of intelligence, and India is at the era of intelligence. And I think the part that we're discussing today is one of the three things, at least in this talk, which is the compute part of it. There are two other parts to it. And you did touch, Thomas, about the algorithm. And we are upon this universal approximator upon us, which can be applied to everything, not just the language, but to anything which has a meaning. Be it biology, physics, even robotics articulation, steering articulation, proteins. We can apply and learn from there. And you said, Alam, that the best thing to do is to be the capital of intelligence. So compute is important. I'm sure there are a billion people here. They'll tell you about compute. But what about our own know-how, the method? This is a rich country, culturally very rich. Our common sense is very different. Our sensibilities are very different. The way we need to take this digitization process that has been taken place, how do we codify that so that we don't lose out? Just like how Paris is the fashion capital, Milan is the fashion capital, India needs to be the intelligence capital. And if we think from that perspective, that know-how needs to be codified. And that's where we need to start. And if we codify that, the algorithm is known, compute you know how to source, there's a better opportunity for us to really make India the intelligence capital. It serves what you all said, build in India, for India, export from India, move your back office structure to the office of the world, be the capital. I think we should commence from there.
Thanks, Vishal. Invest in know-how. Anil, I'm going to come to you next. I think what Thomas and Vishal are also alluding to is investing in R&D, right? The ability to understand how these things are built, that know-how, codify that in some way. So obviously Intel has a lot of R&D investments in India. How are you thinking about how this capital should be invested by the government over the next few years?
Thank you, and it's a great honor to be here, and it's this esteemed crowd here. As regards to, in terms of kind of looking at breaking barriers to the software developers and the software ecosystem, the talent is amazing here, right? What you need to do and what needs to be done is how do you break that access to computing for AI development democratized and broadly available? So if you kind of look back in history, right, there was the telecom world where we had the landlines and the penetration of landlines, and then the mobile era came in, and the wireless and the spectrum. If you kind of think about how you basically, India stepped a computational generation by not needing landlines, and you could break the communication, barriers by having cell phones and the penetration of cell phones, got you connected to the internet. When you think of AI computing in that space, it's going to be breaking that communication barrier, the language barrier, the education barrier. Because what generative AI is going to be doing is make human speak, human understanding, human interactions much more democratized, right? And that codifying everything that's said is great, but to fast track this is where the computational access is fundamental. And now if you look at the innovations that are happening, I think you look at, everyone's familiar with Llama. Llama is a model that started with Llama 2, and there were 70 billion parameters. Guess what? Llama 3, 7 billion parameters is as good as a Llama 2, 70 billion parameters. So there's so much of innovation in the algorithmic side that is going on. But those innovations are not possible if you don't have the computational playground. to bring those ideas to life, right? And so when you look at 10,000 GPUs, right, I think there's two questions, right? What is the outcome that you need to be striving for? If you're trying to look at is this build in India with your unique data, unique culture, you need to have models and the data topologies, the training data sets that have to be highly localized. And if you can break the cost models in India, rest assured it's exportable anywhere in the world. Today, the whole AI ecosystem is you're importing models from the Western world and trying to leverage it in the domestic world. So it's more an application model. So what the infrastructure is going to be looking to do is apply what has already been built. To create new innovation, I think what Thomas was highlighting is how do you be a catalyst and how do you create the investments needed to actually enable algorithmic level work in AI?
Thanks, Anil. I think what you said also about using this compute to apply it to specific problems, build models, increasing computational efficiency, I think is something that we should also factor in how India looks at building out its compute infrastructure. So I'd like to go to folks in this room who are actually building some of these models. So Sambit and Gaurav, if I can come to you, right? Really trying to break this down into numbers, right? Really the question I think on a lot of people's mind is how much compute does India really need, right? The Indian government seems to think 10,000 GPUs for now, right? But we also see other pillars of the India AI mission about building a large language model. And we were hearing earlier in the conversation in the morning about how much compute that actually takes, right? A few thousand GPUs perhaps to train these models, several petaflops. So can you, as folks building these models, give us a sense of how many GPUs it will actually take to build these models in your estimate? And therefore, how much more compute should India be preparing to acquire and build?
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I think if you look at really how OpenAI is building GPT-4, it takes around 25,000 GPUs for 3 months. I mean, to train a trillion parameter model, that's the kind of scope you need. That's the kind of compute you need. But as we all discussed, the trillion parameter model is just one type of model. There are other types of models, the mixture of experts where you break it down into smaller problems, smaller models. So I think that's the ceiling, I would say, for the trillion parameter. The second thing is not just the amount of GPU you need, really what's the cost of GPU, okay? If you can design GPUs at a much lower cost, then obviously you can afford a lot more GPUs. And I think that's where I feel there's an opportunity in India to really see how we build those GPUs. There is huge talent here. 20% of the overall semiconductor task force is in India. So how we build those GPUs and how we don't pay the huge margins that the Western world charges us. And so while you utilize the GPUs that is available to us today, but I think in parallel, we have to see really how do we build those GPUs at a much lower rate, at much lower cost, and how do we scale it up? And the second piece of it is really AI is not just a GPUs. It's also, I think Thomas alluded to, is really also how you propagate AI different form factors, different ways like smartphone AI or AI PCs, AR, VR. There are many ways we can propagate AI. So I think building the chips ourselves at a much lower cost and having different form factors and also looking at variety of models, just not only a trillion parameter model.
Thanks, Amit. Gaurav?
Yeah. So I think the question is not about how many. Clearly 10,000 is minuscule actually. We are not thinking about a startup. We are thinking about a country, right? And country where at least the smaller companies, smaller enterprises, startups don't have access to that much of patient capital. If that was there, we don't need any government support actually, but that's the reality of India, right? If you want smaller enterprises to innovate in AI, they need that support because our VCs are not doing that, right? So I think the one thing that Anuj mentioned, and I was a little disappointed with that it is going to take time. I mean, 10,000 GPUs, if government of India decides to get them, Vishal is sitting here, get them tomorrow. I mean, what's holding us back? Seriously. It's not.
He's sitting next to you, not me. the guy on your right.
So yeah, it's already there. So I mean, if government wants to create that ecosystem, just get them. Get as many as you want. Why delay? Like, let's not optimize too much. Yes, will it create wastage because we will not be optimal? Yes. But if we want to create innovation in a scarcity mindset, good luck with that. It doesn't work. While someone talked about the algorithmic innovation, yes, it will happen. But look at all the top conferences in theoretical computer science. They don't need any GPUs. It's all mathematical, pen and paper stuff, whiteboard stuff. Do we publish more papers in theoretical computer science from India than the Western world? No, it's all the ecosystem. All these things happen with each other. It's not just the GPU, but the presence of enough compute. It creates that energy, it creates that vibrancy to do all of it together. So I hope we understand the speed of essence, and we don't create plans for like Bangalore roads. We take so much time that by the time they get built, they are insufficient and they don't work anymore.
Yeah, fair point, Gaurav. Hear you on the urgency, and one of the things we have heard in some discussions is that perhaps, and maybe this is a chicken and egg situation, they're looking for a business model, right? You're looking for the markets to exist before you can actually acquire and deploy these CPUs, and that's perhaps where I want to take this conversation now. So really, this is a question about making sure this entire investment strategy around compute is commercially viable, right? So I'd like to bring some of you again into this conversation, but maybe we could start with you, Sunil. I think we shall put you on the spot, saying you already hold these GPUs, you can offer them to the government. So talk me through, how a company like yours is thinking about ROI, right? Return on investment. Is it purely in financial terms, as it may be? And perhaps, we should be thinking about other types of ROI as well. And the government perhaps should be investing quickly because there's an ROI in terms of social impact, right? So let's start with you. Tell us what are the economics of acquiring, deploying these GPUs, and why the government already hasn't acquired 10,000 GPUs and deployed it already.
Sure, Amlan, thank you. Yes, I think we all can understand this is a chicken and egg story, that India should have a market, India should have a lot of use cases of developing LLMs or a whole lot of SLMs and inferencing use cases, and once that market is there, who will consume GPUs, and then somebody like me will put GPUs and invest into GPUs so that I can have a return. The reverse is also true. The LLMs will be made in India, or the AI ecosystem will be developed in India only when the GPUs are in India, because right now it's either not available or it's available into some few free credits, and after that it becomes very, very costly. It's not available in India also, sovereignty concerns also come in. Somewhere one of us had to break the chain and take a call that if this technology is big in US, it is big in Europe, it is big in so many countries already developing benefits. India, which has got 1.4 billion people, it is much more digitally enabled compared to rest of the world. All the use cases are into our mobile. If we are consuming all other use cases of technology, why we will not be using AI? If that belief we have as Indians in our digital adoption, it is same going to be case for AI as well. So essentially that chain had to be broken, and that is what the call we took, that yes, we will invest. Instead of being into a scarce situation of 1 node, 2 node, 4 node, can I go for 16,000 node? By the way, that is the size of the order which I placed, which I'm deploying right now. Now, you can say, okay, if there is no customer, what will do? But somewhere I read and discussed with Mehdi also, that our mission is not only from India for India. Our mission is also from India for India and for the world as well. If we are a software and services exporter, largest in the world, why we cannot be AI infrastructure and platform exporter also? So today, from my first phase, which I have gone live with just in the last few days, 70% of my consumption has been taken by global operators. But from people from US are coming and subscribing to my GPUs, and people from Europe are subscribing, 30% from India. Now, this is something which is giving me payback, so I'm not getting into losses. Second point, while GPU is a costly thing, and I think considering the scarcity in the world, obviously there'll be a cost which might not come down for a reasonable period of time, but I was doing some maths. If I take a 5-year cost of deploying GPUs, 60% is GPUs, the InfiniBand and all the paraphernalia, the capex part, but 40% of the cost actually is data center, power, internet, cybersecurity, and everything which goes around that. In India, and by the way, I'm not taking the cost of the platform layer on the top of that, which is completely skill set, which is India's forte. So if I am able to, which in India, I'm able to reduce my cost of OPEX, which is significantly I can reduce. India is a, from data center point of view, we build much, cost-effective data centers, and my skill set cost also is much lesser. It means I can still have my GPU services per hour rate much lesser in rest of the world, and again, that is what we have been able to do. Many people are talking that maybe it's a marketing gimmick, we are trying to show a local center, but it is a price which is competitive compared to the rest of the world, and it is still giving me enough returns. So in India, it is possible to give the world-class product. It is available in abundance, and we can still have a very, very good ROI from India.
Thanks, Sunil. Interesting insight on this global market for compute. Tanuj, can I come to you? You've been studying compute usage in India, right, by startups. This is what the government really wants to do, get compute into the hands of people building, solving problems for India. What does your research or survey, your analysis tell you? Is there a market in India for existing compute? Do we need more compute, or are we just going to be acquiring these chips to sell them outside?
No, I think I want to just bring in small amount of nuance here, which is that India will need more and more compute, as Thomas predicted, as Vishal was saying. Like Sunil is saying, this is a chicken and egg problem. If I knew there was enough of it available, I can rent it and build something on it. Like Gaurav is saying, I will go and do it, right? Our developers will do that. The question that I think that we should ask ourselves in this occasion is, what is the government policy? What is the Indian government going to do about chips and AI? Which is where I have certain sort of, just fundamental nuances. So if Sunil is going and getting on a lot of these 4,000 GPUs, if it's 30% now, by the time the next batch of your 4,000 comes in, hopefully it's 50%, and then hopefully it goes locally. And that's a very smart way of doing it, right? The government should also be thinking in that way, right? If you have 4,000 crores to spend, right? How do I spend the first 1,000 crores to prove that this is helping the cases which are white spaces, right? Where, say, a Sunil's prices will never be affordable. Like, say, research in ISC. So we, use cases you were asking me, startups. I think startups are aplenty. A lot of them are serving international sort of SaaS stuff out of here. So like, it's impossible to summarize the use case. I think where I'm seeing starvation the most is that computational methods applying to research. Lots of research fields, as that paper of AI mentioned across fields from Thomas's lab is very true. We're now starting to see drug discoveries to everything where people are just like, first let's do a computational scan of the whole search space, figure out some viable solutions, and then go experiment on those solutions only. And this is from biology, medicines, everywhere. This is the place where I see a shortage. So if the government is to do something, or if it's something like, I agree with Gaurav, do it now, then you do it for these spaces. That would be my thing. Why can't you do it now? I just want to answer that question, and it comes down to government procurement. If you've not had to deal with it.
We'll come to procurement. But thanks, Tanuj. Good point. Do it now, but also experiment, demonstrate value, and then that will inform the next few stages. Thomas, I want to come to you. You've heard a lot of people and maybe provide some comments at the end of it. But before I can do that, Colonel Singh, from a government perspective, right? Obviously, tracking and monitoring existing compute usage is going to be really important to inform policy, right? Acquisition of GPUs can only be informed by how current usage is. So how is CDAC thinking about obviously monitoring compute usage? What insights have you gathered already? And again, if you want to answer this question of how government should be thinking about increasing compute capacity over the next few years.
Is about the monitoring. I mean, it's a fairly simple job. You have enough tools available, and you got to invest resources in doing that round the clock, and getting back to the users where you find that non-optimal use of compute has been made. That's a very simple equation that there may be money to buy compute worth, or rather maybe 100 cores, but then if 100 cores are not available, then what use it is? So we have devised ways. CDAC is having maybe knowing that we are having India's, as of now, probably the biggest, I'm not talking about the hyperscalers, but whatever discrete machine we have, it's, ranking, it ranked in 23 as a top 75 in top 500. It's Param Siddhi AI, which is 82 nodes and based on the NVIDIA A100. And so we have devised ways and means to keep monitoring and keep hand-holding the people who actually come in and use our compute. And we keep advising them. So this kind of a capacity has to be built up. That is one point I want to make, is about the capacity building. we are also starting, or rather we have courses. We are doing postgraduate courses of 6 months in which we have courses of HPC system administration, HPC in AI, and we are doing NASCOM Prime courses. So we have made a start, but it has to be done on a much bigger scale, so that when people understand how to do the system administration, how to actually see mix and match between the software and the hardware, where something is going wrong, where your weights are not being tuned properly, or where your software is suboptimal by seeing the blips in the graph where the percentage CPU or GPU utilization has gone down, memory utilization gone down, how to correct it. So those are the things which need to be corrected, and need to be corrected soon, so that it's a costly affair, and we need to do that exceedingly fast. And one more thing we would like to bring about, the second part of the question you asked, is about the compute itself. So a lot of people have expressed their opinion about deploying more and more compute. I would like to caution here that we should also start thinking, and a start has been made, a small start has been made, given the kind of policy consistency which exists in India today, and the ecosystem which exists in India today, of thinking of setting up design and fabrication facilities for compute, building compute in India, and thinking about a time when it would, today you may be a generation behind in technology when you actually come into the market, but a start has to be made, and you have to be consistent and aim for that time when it makes economic sense to produce the latest technology here and export it. Under the National Supercomputing Mission, we have already made our mark there. We have come up with indigenous servers called Rudra, based on the Intel series of CPUs. It has 2 GPUs, and we have brought it into the market. We have 3 technology partners, and we have now we are thinking of the next 2 generations, which will be carrying more GPUs, which will have faster interconnect between the GPUs, and which will be GPU agnostic. It can take on all the 3 kinds of families of GPUs which will be available. So even these kind of initiatives probably we have to think about.
Sure. Thank you, Colonel Singh. Thomas,
Nath.
anything that anything that we're missing in this first, before we move to the second theme on sovereignty? I just wanted to get your thoughts on the larger question of investment strategies and private government collaboration.
Well, I think, can you hear? Yes. So first of all, I want to thank the panel. I mean, all of you have brought out really important points, and so they're all apropos. I think at the same time, I would say, having been in this business for a long time, this is not about allocation of money, resources, but I've always thought about 30%. We are talking about the 30% of the equation, which is the infrastructure. I always think that there's a people game. 70% of success is about people. How do you align the incentives for people to commit their career, their ambitions, aspirations? And I think as you structure this ecosystem, it is really important to not just restrict yourself. The second thing is that GPU is just an easy way of talking about the infrastructure. Right? Let me tell you, Frontier, when we were building, every computer at scale, I've always said that if you look at the fit rate, you can mathematically work out and prove that this system should never work. Right? 65 million components. The failure rate of, if you look at a SKU, the failure rate would say it'll never run. So these are very, very difficult things to operate in a resilient, reliable way for private sector and entrepreneurial community to thrive, because they have to have these resources available to them predictably, reliably. And so I think it's also important to build not just in the algorithm or use cases, but the talent that is needed to run the infrastructure, to keep it running and keep it going is very, very, very important. And then Tanuj, bureaucracy is bureaucracy everywhere. And and I don't mean in a negative sense. So you have to also incentivize and align the incentives there. So making the regulatory framework appropriate for the ambition for this initiative is important. And what I mean by that is that there is going to be, generally there is a reticence to deal with failure, particularly when you are using public funding. And so you have to balance the risk reward and failure success metrics such that people people can go beyond and not take conservative approach, but really push the envelope in trying to develop and deploy. I think that's very important.
Thanks, Thomas. We will definitely get into, I think, the larger policy framework that's going to help make all of this happen. But we're fast running out of time. This has been really interesting already. But I do want to move tracks to, I think, another elephant in the room, if I can call it, is this question of sovereignty. Right? In Anuj's presentation, he spoke very clearly about this goal of ensuring that India is self-sufficient when it comes to its AI infrastructure. I've had many conversations about this. I don't think anybody fully understands what sovereignty means in the context of India's AI infrastructure. So I'm going to put us all, give everyone here a challenge, which is if we can in this room today try and at least shape the outlines of what sovereign AI infrastructure for India looks like, that would be a good outcome, right? There are many ways to think about sovereignty, of course. We can think about control and supervision. We can think about autonomy. We can think about economic growth and independence. We can think about enforcement of regulation. We can think about resilience, right? These are all different elements of sovereignty. I'm just wondering whether in this room we can all agree on what the elements of India's sovereign AI infrastructure should look like, and perhaps this could be different in different countries, and we should get into that as well. But again, Vishal, if I can start with you. I know you've been talking a lot about what sovereign AI means. Can you share a little bit about what this means or should mean in the Indian context?
So there are three ingredients from a sovereign perspective, and all three of them exist in India. Firstly, the skill sets. Everybody's spoken about the skill sets. We do it for ourselves. We do it for Globe even more. So we know how our technology people can be applied under the hood. Second is that we've got this massive, massive manpower. Citizens, 1.4 billion, but only 1% of them use computers. Because you have to speak to the computer in the computer language. And they can't afford that, and they do not know how to do it. But today, you can speak to the computer and teach the computer, so we can bring the computer to them. It could be over the mobile phone. So for the first time, the democracy of computing is upon us, where all 1.4 billion people will have access to computing, and that exists here. The third is our own digital experience, which is already in play. As we talk, as we embed, as we capture, that domain experience is here. We have to bring these three elements together on the infrastructure discussion that we are doing. And then we are ready for sovereignty. Everything else that you spoke about, policy, regulation, safety, security, of course has to come in. Even the cars did it in 1920. The cars is not the safest thing if you just leave them loose. You have regulations. That's why we are so safe on the roads. So that is a part that we can discuss later, but these three components exist here. Most importantly, the intelligence has to be built by Indian companies in India, and these will be built in AI factories in India, just like Sunil's company's done it, and that's the first glimpse.
Interesting, Vishal. Roni, can I come to you on this question, right? You obviously at Microsoft operate in different jurisdictions. There are different conceptions of sovereignty around the world. I'm seeing more and more an emphasis on sovereignty in national AI strategies. The UK's compute infrastructure is all about, compute for national security. The US is using trade laws and export controls to increase its own geopolitical positions. Given that you operate in different markets, how should India be thinking about sovereignty? And is AI sovereignty this single thing, or does it have other elements relating to, for example, data sovereignty and things like that?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I think the term sovereignty is a complex one. I think you brought it out a little bit in the initial comments. I would like to at least break it down between two axes, axes of control and of innovation. And the axis of innovation, I would have additional points around economic value, around ability to grow, provide opportunities for the demographic dividend we have in the country. I think what people are realizing is that while, and globally, whether it is countries like Korea, whether it is the G42 partnership that Microsoft has done in the Middle East, whether it is Singapore, what countries are realizing is that the pace at which AI innovation is happening, there is a very important element of not just value, but time to value. And what that means is, if you are able to ensure that you are creating, using not just the GPUs, and we've been kind of talking about GPUs all the time. At the end of the day, AI infrastructure requires not just GPUs, but networks and memory. In fact, the networking that the Microsoft infrastructure that is used to train, by the way, if you know OpenAI models are trained on Microsoft infrastructure. So the latest model is also getting trained on Azure infrastructure, and we are building a supercomputer for the next level of infrastructure. So the networking that is used to connect these chips can go around the planet Earth multiple times around. Okay, so we have to really realize that it's not just the chips. I began my career in semiconductor industry, so I will not underplay the importance of chips, but when you realize it has to be a systems view. Having said that, I think the importance to realize that it really does take the full stack, and not just the infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I mean compute, memory, networking. The power hungriness of these require different ways of thinking about power management. We talked a little bit about in the earlier panel about the kind of power hungriness these chips have, and there's a lot of innovation happening in that. Then to drive value from them, it's the entire software stack, which is the algorithms, which is the orchestration layer, the software, the ability to manage these GPUs. So what we are seeing is the point of sovereignty, if one defines very clearly, that do you want to create economic value in this period of AI, when the country has demographic dividend for a limited period of time? How will we do that, especially in sectors where you have to invest in the people capital? How can we do that? Particularly, I'm thinking of education and healthcare. Can we do that in a way that allows that economic value to come across while keeping the elements of how much you want to control and what is the level you want to build in India? We have had a discussion around how much R&D happens in India. Yes, R&D is changing. Tanuj talked about the fact. R&D fundamentally is changing with AI, and not just by exploring models, but also how simulations are done. So all of that has to happen while we say we're going to wait for some kind of a compute infrastructure to be built up. The train has moved on.
Sure. Thanks, Rohini. Ranganath, Iday, I'd like to get your thoughts on this idea that, sure, we want to create economic value in India, right? But again, one of those goals is to ensure self-sufficiency across that entire supply chain, right? To ensure that, as Vishal was saying, that this is actually built in India. So I'm just wondering, is there a relationship between the Make in India program and what we're trying to achieve with the IndiaAI mission, right? India's semiconductor mission also talks about ensuring that these are built, assembled, packaged in India. So do you see a link between making in India and this larger goal of sovereignty under the IndiaAI mission? Hriday, Ranganath, for both of you.
Yeah, there is obviously a linkage. And if you were to look at sovereignty, it's a definition that can mean anything to anybody in that context, right? And with a technology like artificial intelligence, which is so pervasive and perhaps exists between the edge and the cloud across everything, and also so very foundational, right? In the way that you would see everything across the globe be impacted by AI. Sovereignty gets defined there, and it's very organizational, it's very data relevant, it's very country relevant, and there is definitions for that. But if you were to look at artificial intelligence itself, it's a journey, and in that context, building sovereignty can mean like what we are doing today, making servers and other constituents of the entire infrastructure parts there. But I would again go back to the fact that Rohini was mentioning, it's all about an outcome and delivering this as an ecosystem, right? While we spoke of a lot of constituents that make up an AI infrastructure, your ability to run with that infrastructure and make it work for you like Thomas also mentioned, right? It took him 4 years to kind of put everything to work. And, it basically impacts time to market. If you had the ability to rightly put across so many options today, right? Whether it's a model stack, the compute stack, or whether it's the data stack, how do you basically ascertain the right stack that really fits into your business and break that, get that to the market as quickly as possible becomes a very, very important criteria. That's where I feel it's important, like we speak with everything else, our ability to walk the talk with respective organizations, right, in terms of their own needs. And it could be by definition of what does sovereignty mean, or it could be by definition what your AI strategy means. So it needs to be a comprehensive outlook. And if you take AI, it is a technology that's going to get every constituent together, right? I think it's a unifying force from a technology standpoint. So how do you leverage that becomes important.
Yeah.
So Amlan, what I see that this is something which is quite interconnected. I would say sovereignty on one hand, Make in India, and IndiaAI. These three things are pretty much interconnected. I can make you travel through the journey of how Make in India started in 2017 when the program was launched by DIPP and guidelines was launched. And after that, nodal ministries were asked to come out with their, product-centric guidelines for production of products in India and manufacturing guidelines and all. That's how the process of Make in India started. And during this time, I think the best part is that, sovereignty as a subject has emerged like anything. And there is a, reason for it, because this has emerged as a response to data management issues or concerns. Because when you say that data sovereignty, compliance, and digital autonomy, these three things I feel like are the primary concerns which are required to be addressed when you are trying to build the IndiaAI cloud, right? And I think the very basic step is that you opt for the hardware which is produced in India, the components which are traceable, which are used during the manufacturing process. You have got the complete chain of information available with you throughout the process of manufacturing to taking into AI cloud, and thereafter using and building the cloud stack over it. So what I find is that this is the time that you can harness the power of Make in India and achieve sovereignty of the highest order or of the highest degree. That's how I think this should be looked at.
Yeah, thanks, Uday.
Yeah.
From what I'm gathering, it seems like what we want to do when we're saying sovereign AI infrastructure for India is to ensure that ideally these are built in India, but definitely under the control, as Roni was saying, of the Indian sovereign and for the benefit of India. And this makes me wonder whether sovereign AI, based on where we are today, is not so much a destination but a journey, and we're in early stages of this journey. So Gaurav, if I can come to you, right? The one thing that I think we haven't heard someone say on this table today is that India should build its own foundation model to be able to be considered sovereign AI, right? Maybe Vishal alluded to it, but I want to ask you very pointedly whether that's a critical ingredient for us to be considered sovereign, as having sovereign AI infrastructure, because I was listening to the panel earlier today and they said, how is India going to use Western models without any cultural alignment and say that we actually have sovereign AI infrastructure?
Yeah, thanks, Amlan. So I think there is, when you think of sovereign, right, I think, so I'll park the question for foundation model. I think it is an outcome of the discussion. I think why do we need sovereign? Obviously, we care about our citizens, even if the models are hosted outside by big tech, Western big tech. Government has a responsibility to take care of its citizens, how they must be used. The DPDP Act that came last year is somewhat about that. Data usage, how the citizens' data is used, how financial data cannot be processed outside India. We already have examples of that. So that is the left extreme of the spectrum. Then on the right side, we want to lead the world in AI. So if you want to do that, it is much beyond just taking care of your citizens, but you want to lead the world, right? So that is the whole continuum. We are somewhere in the middle right now, where we are talking about at least building our own applications, our own wrappers, maybe contextualized for Indian interest. And I think the foundation models is somewhere beyond this and before leading the world. I think there is no way we can be a AI nation in true sense, like unless we believe we are okay being AI market, which I hope we are not. I think we have to build. There is no other question. As simple as that.
Okay, thanks, Gaurav. Sambit, Anil, where are we in this journey of ensuring that the chips that we use in India's AI infrastructure are built, designed, manufactured, packaged, assembled, and used in India? Start with you, maybe Anil?
So I think we got to break this down, right? I think there's AI is, I think everybody alluded here, there's a sense of urgency. And when you think of that, and we talk about sovereignty, we talk about self-reliance and everything else, how do you phase it, right? So AI is about systems play, right? So first step is that data sovereignty is the kind of the way to think about it is, where is the data generated? Where is the data generating the intelligence? Okay, if you think about models as an ingestion of intelligence, models get intelligent by the data it sources, the data it's used to train. And if the data resides here and the model is sitting outside the country, so just think about it, you're exporting your intelligence. Okay, just first principles, right? Then you have your system sovereignty. If you don't have systems available in India, right? You don't have systems that are actually hosting this data. So you're not going to be able to move this data inside your own country. So that's the sense of urgency that is to be created is, how do I first manage the data I'm generating here, which is, by the way, probably about 20% of the world's data is generated here, right? And how much of it is actually processed and computed here, right, is the way to think about it. And that answers the questions on how models are going to get generated, whether it's a large foundational model or a frontier model or a small model. The ability to create models is just an outcome, right? And then you get that model sovereignty as we talked about. And then you have the balance of trade from exporting applications versus importing applications. So you got to kind of think in that context. And when you come to chips and make in India, build in India, is all about call it a supply chain sovereignty, right? You want to have supply chain resilience. So if you think in that systems view and say, you know what are the steps that I need to do to protect the capabilities that I want in the country? You got to start from, hey, first, can I keep my data here? Can I have my systems here? Can I have my models here? Can I have my applications built here? And then the cost optimizations of chips. Even in chips, now it's packaging. You don't need to actually build the chip itself. You get IP, and then you can create your own custom silicon. So there are so many other steps. Making sure you have a standards-based open ecosystem so you can have different vendors participate. So that part of it is going to take time.
Yeah. Thanks, Anil. I like this idea of a systems view of sovereignty. Samit, same question, but I'm going to add a little bit of a twist as well, which is, we sometimes think that it's we're moving towards sovereignty if an Indian company is doing this. So when we come to chips, right, for example, I know they're not represented here in the room, but Tata is investing in designing and building chips in India, but that's in partnership with PSMC, right? So this idea that, we will only be sovereign if an Indian company and only an Indian company is doing that, is that even realistic, right? So I don't know if you're happy to talk a little bit about your efforts to be building chips in India and whether that's in partnership with foreign companies and what that means for sovereignty. But also more broadly, this idea of why we're approaching sovereignty, how can we achieve that?
Yeah, actually 20 years back when I started my journey in India, there are hardly 2,000 chip designers in India. And right now that number is around 100,000. So really India has gone quite a bit ahead in building chips. Pretty much all the multinational companies like the Intels, AMDs, NVIDIA, Broadcom, all of them have very strong presence in India. A lot of the chips get done out of India by the Indian engineers. Okay. Now, in the last 3-4 years, I am seeing some impetus, some momentum from Indian companies, CDAC, to build chips by Indian companies or Indian entities. And we are also one of them. In Kutrim, we are building chips. So the talent exists to design chips, and there is experience, and we are starting their journey. It will take time, it will take some patience, but we will get there. Because the same people are building chips for the MNCs. Now when it comes to packaging and foundry, even a lot of the US companies, they're fabless companies. That means they depend upon foundries from TSMC and Intel and other foundries. So we will have to also depend on some of the external foundries. But there are initiatives right now to build some foundries in India and some packaging houses. And I think just a matter of time. The challenge there will be really how do we get that talent? How do we get the foundry talent? Because design talent we have quite a bit. The foundry talent we don't have as much. So how do we grow there?
We'll get to the talent question in a second. With that, I just want to move again to the next theme, I think, which is, again, really, I think, important. I'm going to come to you, Tanuj, on this next question. So just hold your placard. We need to discuss now, a few steps ahead, right? Let's assume now we have, AI infrastructure. It's built out. It's sovereign. The task really here under the AI mission is to make it accessible to people in India, right? Whether that's researchers, startups, enterprise companies who need it. I think how we want to frame this discussion today in this conversation is to try both identify the problem statement and then recommend some solutions, right? So when we're talking about this question of, access to AI, I think we should in this room first try and define whether we have access to AI and why we don't have access to AI, if that's a problem we're trying to solve. So, just to kick things off, if we can start with this idea of who's providing access to compute today. And, it's essentially the hyperscalers. And Rohini, I'm looking to you. And clearly there is a market for this compute and people are using this compute. It's a profitable business, of course, Microsoft in India. So what's the problem, right, when it comes to access? What is the government trying to solve for? And I know I should come to you, Rohini, first, but I'm going to actually ask Tanuj to maybe take this question because, Tanuj, you've been obviously talking about this problem of access, trying to create new and innovative solutions to promote access to compute. What's the problem? What is Rohini and co not doing right?
No, I don't think that's the way to frame it, Ramdan.
Rohini,
you're doing a wonderful job. Please don't. That's not why we started OCC. I think the idea is that the cloud itself started as a idea around, remember how everybody was about, let's move to cloud, right? And now that a lot of companies have moved to the cloud, there is also a certain sort of, reel back and saying, maybe some things are not meant for cloud, etc. And people are figuring out their cloud configuration, so to speak, right? And I think this is where there is a gap that we notice that for an India price point, sort of, all these ways, if I had, if Sunil is a very ambitious person, he goes out and says, okay, 16,000 GPUs I'm going to be ordering. I have that much space, I have that much power, I have real estate, I can do all of that, right? I think there'll be a lot more entrepreneurs at a 5, 10 crore, 20 crore price point, at which point, they can start a data center, but whom are they selling it to, right? Because the Microsofts and the others, Azures and AWSs of the world want large data centers to partner with because they need to take large amounts of capacity and manage a large amount of capacity. So the gap that I feel that we can address here is that there is a missing middle, what we call the micro data center, which is, and there are some amazing examples of this in India already. There's a company right here in Delhi called Dotplank that makes data centers in shipping containers. Again, not a new idea, but they do it very well and they let you just lease the data center capacity, right? Which brings me back to that previous question. I think I'm the only dissenting voice, so I would like to say this. What is sovereignty? One is self-sufficiency. I see a lot of ideas of self-sufficiency. I think number 2 is self-determination, which I think is way, way more important and way, way more urgent than self-sufficiency. You spoke about the export control bans from the US. That is the example of a thing that scares me more than anything else. There is one country or a few countries who may stop people from accessing this technology. Why does that scare me, right? Do I really care about one set of chips or etc.? No, it's because ultimately, let's not forget what we had said even at the start of this. This is a people-centric program. We want the people of India to have the benefits of using AI, especially it will be applied in education, in healthcare, etc. And if there is somebody else who can put a stop to that, that is what you should be protecting against first. Now, we might stumble our way into doing it. We might not make the best chips initially, whatever else. Those are problems for us to take care of. I think self-determination, which sometimes can be assured by thinking about the modern supply chains and all its entanglements, right? We don't even make an app today end-to-end, right? Which is all our own. Like if you use a front end, you're probably using React. React is not our own, right? You're viewing it on a browser that is not your own, a Play Store that is not your own, a cell phone OS that is not your own. So sufficiency in the software stack, I find like vague, right? And if you have something open source, isn't that good enough? So those are questions I would ask them on the software side. But yes, on the chips, etc., we should keep trying. But realistically, if we can't get to the power efficiencies of the AMDs and the NVIDIAs of the world, while we get there, we should still have access to that kind of compute at that efficiency, at that price point. Otherwise, AI in India for the people at the price point we need it for the people doesn't happen, right? So that's the sovereignty thing where I think self-determination way more than self-sufficiency. But yes, what is the problem that hyperscalers do not address? I think there is a huge number of businesses, MSMEs, who will come online, who will need AI. And they need a very specific class of AI with a very specific kind of AI infrastructure that I don't think is the primary focus of the hyperscalers right now.
I'd like to add here, very good point he made, is not just the access, but responsible access, which I feel the point I had made that, some amount of hand-holding is required, especially to the startups and the MSMEs, to tell them that, okay, your use case is not optimal, how to make it optimal, correct programming practices, parallelization, because now HPC AI is definitely converging, and it offers a much more efficient way to solve a problem than just, getting GPUs and getting it done with. So I feel that, responsible access probably would be a better paradigm in this case.
We have responsible AI and we also have responsible access. No, I'm going to.
I will have to respond to that.
Rohini, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to you first. Sunil, I'm going to come to you as well. But Thomas, if I can just ask you again, just to take us a step back, right? You've been following these technological trends for a while now, right? When it comes to questions of access and affordability, right? What are the emerging technology trends that we should be paying attention to India, right? To be able to promote access at the edge to the people who need it. It's a very complex demography. There are, rural customers with very, as Tanuj was saying, very different, perhaps, needs and requirements that hyperscalers are not being able to meet, perhaps. Is there anything on the technological trajectory that we should be paying attention to in India?
Well, I mean, there's the pace at which technology is changing for and driven by AI is just breathtaking. What I've been waiting to answer this question, the question that you framed, which was, what is sovereignty? And I would completely agree with what Tanu said, which is self-determination. But I will also add timeliness and urgency, right? So we sometimes confuse sovereignty with make in country, because those things are the time scales don't align with the objectives and goals. So you have to keep the objectives and goals in mind. It does not mean that you should not aspire to manufacture, but you should not hold the advancements that you can make in AI and its impact on society and people's life, waiting to build up key parts of the supply chain locally. So I think I would, when I have difficulty sort of putting my arms around this sort of systems, I go back to the analogy of the electric grid or the electric infrastructure. The responsibility is to deliver AI capability to the citizens now or as soon as possible, to deliver goods and services that impact their lives, whether it's in agriculture, health, education, etc. And do it in a predictable, reliable, resilient way. And in the meantime, with the right incentives, private sector will look to see which part of the supply chain needs to be made here in India. We live in a globally connected world. Despite the kind of trade blips that you see, I don't think that is going to change. And so the important thing is to make sure that determine what you need to have in India, starting with data sovereignty, and then add to that stack and maybe sometimes delete from it as things change. So think of it as a systems.
Yeah. On technologies that can help enable?
Technologies, I think that the advantage continue to be in, so I think that we talk about hyperscalers because it has captured the imagination of people with ChatGPT, etc. I think the next big thing that's going to happen is AI on your PCs, on your desktops, on your phones, and out on the edge, because that is where you meet the 1.4 billion people in India. And so, to me, that is where the biggest opportunity lies.
Thomas. Rohini, I'm going to let you.
Just one second, right? I think he spoke beautifully. Let's not miss out on that opportunity, what he stated. But if you go to simplicity, there are only two paradigms. One paradigm is that you run fast, capture the time, and win. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the second paradigm is that you understand what you're trying to do, which is the social economic part from where it started, pivot it on that, and figure out how you want to build. If living in India for all my life, I think that's what India basically looks at. And then he framed it beautifully. He framed it beautifully because we need to get onto the train. And we'll put in all the regulations and the safety part and things like that. We now need to get onto it because this is not about solving a problem. This is about productivity. This is about an AI factory that produces intelligence. You're working in a new industrial revolution. Just like we brought water, we put it over the fire, steam came out, and so many things have happened. Now you're bringing your domain experience, which is the data, and you're pouring it into a numerical number, which is a floating point, and you're putting that into a factory, and factory is producing a floating point, which has the intelligence. And then you play with that intelligence and you differentiate yourself. There's a new economy upon us. Let's not miss out what he's trying to say.
Sure. Yeah. No, Vishal, the stakes are high.
No, I just want to comment on the startups part, right? Because I think just like Sunil was talking about India being able to export compute, the reason startups come to a hyperscaler is because they also want to go global. Their ability to go global and serve SaaS companies like in whether it's in Europe or other parts of the world, they need to be able to host data centers to be able to meet actual basic requirements of latency. So our job as a platform provider is to help startups innovate fast, understand the use case the problem they are trying to solve, and from India go global. That is and in fact go to market together and go to customers together. That is what we try to do with startups. So I would ask our startups to actually not just think for India, but think for global.
Thanks, Tony. Hriday, Ranganath, I'm going to come to you next. Sunil, I have a question for you, right? A different question. So we're talking about access and affordability, right? This is clearly a key objective of the India AI mission. But as I mentioned early on, we need to ensure this is commercially viable, right? So can you talk us through some potential models in which, right, the government is obviously investing upfront in GPUs, they're looking at cloud players to help deploy this. We're looking at technologies like edge computing to get it closer to the people. But what is the commercial viability of this entire enterprise, right? How is profit sharing? How is CapEx going to be distributed across different actors in this entire value chain?
I think it is not so complicated as I think we all are feeling like, and there's a very regular cloud model. See, even right now, I am giving, sorry, I have to put my context just to explain the thing. Right now, I'm giving GPUs to anybody who wanted even for 1 hour or 1 week or 1 month or 1 year at something like $2.5 per hour, right? This is lowest in the world. This is almost 1/10 of what possibly is available in some of the developed countries. And I'm not cutting margins. I'm still making enough money. There's a business plan behind this. As I explained earlier, yes, there's a CapEx involved in acquiring chips, right? But there is a 40% extra which comes on the data center space, the power, the skill sets and internet and everything else. That is where India scores heavily. So even if I am able to see the demand that today I can export it to world because that is a huge demand there and there is a scarcity everywhere. They will come to me if I'm giving the as good a quality of a GPU and a service at a price point which is low and I have got availability. Why will they not come to me? And that is something which I witnessed in the last couple of months. So that is my business model today, maybe 70% worldwide, 30% India. I would love this equation to change to 30% me serving the world and 70% India, but the starting has been made. And now if anybody says today in this room, Sunil, can you give me couple of nodes, couple of GPUs, H100s, right? Tomorrow I can give it. So first of all, the availability is not a question, and this is not a capex game. I think Tanush talked about somebody purchasing, we are not even talking about purchasing in cloud. For example, when Rohini is making a cloud or Amazon, Azure, Google, they are putting the capex, they are putting in manpower, they are converting into a usage model. That is what cloud is, and that is what we have done. So today, anybody and everybody in India can actually acquire it at a price, as I said, as low as $2.5 per hour. Now, the second part, sorry, just to share with you, and I think that is what PPP model in India AI mission means. Government is not talking about, as far as my understanding goes, of buying chips, because it's not a matter of buying chips. Then they will have to think, okay, somebody will have to make a data center, which will be 50 kilowatt per rack, which will be very complex data center, and there'll be a whole lot of paraphernalia around that. Government is also talking about, they will take it on a OPEX model from somebody like me, somebody like Microsoft, or somebody, right, who will give it on a as a service model. Now, $2.5 may be very, very good for, let's say, majority of the people. It comes into the reach of most of the startups who are reasonably funded. If government feels no, it should be accessible even to the startups who are at a very, very seed stage. Maybe it needs to be available to students, to researchers who don't have any money. That is the delta from $2.5 to, let's say, a $0 or a $1.25, that is where this money should go, of subsidizing. And there was a meeting, I think 2 weeks back in METI where some of this discussion was happening, and the secretary sir was very, very clear. Why should I subsidize? There was the demand of subsidizing either the manufacturers or the service providers, and I was very clear, and he also said, government need not subsidize people like us. They need to subsidize the end user. We will give the most best service, we will give the best rate available compared to rest of the world. Whatever that price is, let government pay to the end startup, and that startup so that they can pay to me. It's as simple as that. It's available today, commercially viable even today. What government will do will just add on the top of that to make the ecosystem much bigger.
So, thanks, Sunil. I have gotten a message saying we're time up. I know we're in the throes of a really interesting discussion, but really I need to start wrapping up. So I really want to go to the audience. I know you've all been a very patient audience packed into this room. I saw extra chairs coming in. So I do want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. If there are any questions, raise your hand. I'll take a couple. You can come up to the mic up front and ask a question. I saw a hand up right here, the gentleman in the black waistcoat. Yeah.
Hi. So my question is to Mr. Sunil. And I have a couple of points noted if I can just go over them.
Please keep your comments to 20 seconds max.
Sure. So Mr. Thomas talked about some new approximation models where they don't update the weights and things like that. I want to make a case for smaller GPUs. They exist in the market. Why does India have a market for that? So Mr. Amlan Mohanty also mentioned about the market, the chicken and the egg problem, the market and the effort to make the GPUs and the data centers. Now, most startups, we are a drone company here headquartered in New Delhi, and we end up finding ourselves needing to use maybe 1,000 GPUs, but they're not 1,000 H100s, they're not 1,000 A100s. There are 1,000 smaller GPUs, maybe like, the older ones, 1060s, 1080s, 4090s, something like that. Almost no data center, including AWS, the hyperscalers or Yotta or Control-S or anyone, is able to give those at such large numbers. Now, I think that's where most startups are facing the challenge today, because most of us, when we are incubated, I find them to be developing models, testing, maybe Google Colab at the most of it, but at the end of it, we are not able to make a deal with the data centers.
Please get your question.
So that's the question, sir. I think like the smaller GPUs, services, startups, the gap probably in the market is not accessibility and price point, but rather the type of services and the type of GPUs available, which may be for larger companies, but may not be as appropriate for startups which are trying to make 1,000 GPU, like, AI engine, something like that.
We can talk offline. It will look like a marketing activity on my behalf in this conference. But
yeah, I think we'll move to the next question. Gentlemen
so
here.
About it. Yeah,
I'll take two more questions. Mustard shirt, and are there any more questions at the back?
Yes. My basic question is that we are finding that NVIDIA is basically innovating quite fast. There previously GPUs used to come within 3 years. Now they have come up with their Rubin, etc. after 6 months, 1 year. So basically, their GPU, and which will put a lot of pressure on the companies, to innovate. Government will have to procure personal computers, PCs, software, cloud services have to. Will also have to spend a lot of capex. So do you see that that this will be a hurdle, as far as these innovations are concerned, and this will put a lot of pressure on everyone to innovate faster, So what will be the way forward, as far as this is concerned, because it is going to be very difficult to monetize these type of services at such a scale where billions and billions already NVIDIA is in trillions.
Got your question. Is there a pressure to monetize, Vishal? Your mic, Vishal.
So you don't have to worry about it because the software layer is abstracted. And that's why I keep saying it's about a game of an AI factory. And the factory will give you at the lowest cost. How Sunil and how everybody else will drive the cost is a function of how quickly I innovate and bring your costs down. And it's a good thing that's happening. It's a fantastic thing that is happening. He has a know-how, everybody else has a know-how. What you need is a price that's coming down and you can innovate and your software is protected. We've done that for 70 years. As an industry, we'll continue to do it throughout our life. We'll give you your protection.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question. Yes, please keep it short, 20 seconds only.
Yeah, I will. Hi, just one question open to the floor. What do big tech corporations gain by supporting efforts to build a sovereign AI? And beyond that, what are the commercial interests that remain beyond helping a nation build a central AI platform?
Sorry, what of your question?
What commercial interests remain alongside helping a nation?
You're saying, is there a commercial interest to help build out
yes
infrastructure for a nation? Rohini, do you want to take the first part of the question? How are big tech companies dealing with this question of sovereignty? No, sorry, can you repeat the first part of your question?
Sorry, my question was, how do big tech corporations gain by supporting, that's the only question.
So
how do
his
big tech
question is fundamentally that if you're going to allow everybody to do it, then what will you do in this country?
Yes, essentially.
No, sorry, I will rephrase the question.
Yes, please rephrase the question.
Yeah, thank you
but I
very
think
much.
at the root of
Vishal, really appreciate your help there. Always Vishal is a great friend. So
what's in it for you?
Here is the thing. Our fundamental model is of a platform. Our job is to help the end users innovate. So if it's a startup that is using the platform to create the product to help their customer, then we have done our job. So, that's the business model. We don't go into any industry that our customers are going into. We are not into retail. We are not into any industry that our customers go into. Our customers innovate on a hyper scale so that they are able to innovate at speed, at scale, go global. And that's our business model.
And I think that's a very good answer, because what she's saying, you have to go to the root cause.
Vishal, you're going to help me even answer the question?
Vishal,
not just rephrase the question.
I'm going to stop you there.
That's a bit much, okay? Mansplaining not required. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can see we're getting a little feisty here. Folks, before I wrap up, before I just do some quick takeaways, I just want to get a last word from Thomas. Anybody else? Okay, Ranganath, one last kind of 30-second comments. I shall go around the room, maybe 30-second comments. Matey folks, please just give us 5 minutes more and we'll get just last round of comments from everyone. Thomas, I'll start with you and then we'll go around.
Just quickly, I just want to once again say this is an exciting initiative, and I want to congratulate the government of India and the AI mission. We can splice and dice thing and focus on the small things. I think you have to abstract out and see what is the art of the possible, and whether it is big tech or a small startup. Ultimately, we do this to solve a real tangible problem, and the small startup to become big techs because you did that very well. So I don't think that you start any business because you say want to make money. It's making money allows them to stay in business so that they can continue to serve the public good. And so I think that's the way I look at it. This is a great opportunity. It's an exciting time. And so I just want to congratulate all of you, and I'm delighted to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Ranganath?
Yeah, just to conclude, I think AI is something that is essentially going to be pervasive. You need to take your application and data wherever it resides, right? You need to provide the resources there. So there was this debate around how the world should look like, whether it should be cloud-centric or whether it should be something on-prem. but truly it's more hybrid in nature. You know, you as a service provider, you as a person who wants to create value for yourself with the technology, need to ensure that this technology is available across the board. Wherever it resides, it needs to come to you. If it's on the phone, you need to have your capability to do that there. So when we say the world is moving to an edge, to a cloud kind of a centric world, it's all about your ability to be hybrid in nature. And AI truly is hybrid as a workload as well. So that's the message. Wherever it resides, the responsibility of delivering what it needs comes to us.
Any more comments, Anil?
So I think AI is about improving the lives of people. And India has 1.3 to 1.5 billion people here whose lives can be amazingly improved with access to AI. So democratizing AI should be the number one, kind of focus. And how fast can we bring that to fruition? The time constant of AI adoption has changed fundamentally. And I think that sense of urgency we all try to look at is how do you accelerate that time constant in India if the aspirations of this country to have the global aspirations, it is fundamental to see how do we get on the train and move fast.
Any more last words?
Yeah.
Today?
So I was hearing, constantly then, speed of innovation should not be missed out at all. And, the chips manufacturing may take time, this, that. I think that will be simply changing the goalpost in that case, because what Make in India policy says, what PLI policy says, it clearly spells out the stage-wise manner of manufacturing expected by a government, from Indian manufacturers. So that is already in place, and we should not change the goalpost by saying that chips are not getting manufactured. That is not getting manufactured anywhere in the world, and those who are trying to build their sovereign cloud, they are not using the chips which are getting manufactured in their own country. So that is number one. Second is, we already have the egg, let the egg hatch. And there is something which is very important, and I think the hatching can happen very easily with VGF in place, and at least the build, operate and own model to happen in India. And I think that is very well articulated by Government of India by their policy. And I think if these two things, if we let these two things happen, I think we are on the right track. So I would like to summarize with that. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more comments, I want to do a quick round of kind of takeaways from this discussion. By the way, I should just say, fascinating conversation. I've been in a lot of these discussions. I really appreciate all of the insights. On the first piece, right, around how India should be thinking about infrastructure rollout, I think the big takeaway, we heard this from everyone, is do it now. There is a sense of urgency that I haven't seen in a lot of other rooms. Maybe there will be some mistakes, but, deploy those GPUs quickly. Right? And I think we also heard that as you're doing that, experiment, monitor, right? Try and see what's working, and that will help inform how the next set of GPUs should be deployed, whether we need to acquire more GPUs, and so on and so forth, right? The other, I think, key element of this infrastructure build-out is that you cannot build that out in isolation. You need the data, you need the skills, you need the talent. So really think about being in a lens of, technical know-how, R&D that needs to work and be built out in parallel with the physical infrastructure itself. On the question of sovereignty, I think we got some really interesting concepts, right? This idea of, systems-based thinking to sovereignty. Think about building sovereignty across different elements of that stack, right? Think about, self-determination as an interesting approach to how India should be thinking about sovereignty. There's this idea about, intelligence being built in India for India by India, but I think it was very clear that to be pragmatic, this will need to be an iterative process, right? There is an urgency about this. And so we really can't wait for India to be building everything from scratch before we, start claiming sovereignty. And lastly, on this question of access and affordability, I think it was really interesting that we heard a few kind of emerging technologies that will help us bring, AI to the hands of the people. But I think what was surprising that commercial viability of this does not seem to be as complex an issue, right? So I think this again speaks to this issue as, don't worry about, finding the right market, finding the right price points, making sure this is viable for all of the market participants. Acquire, develop, deploy those GPUs now. Let's try and make India the use case capital of the world. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session. Round of applause for the speakers, please.
I also want to recognize the moderator. You did a fantastic job.